The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for January 7th. Your reader for this hour is Claudia. 2 million Epstein docs still pending. Records under review weeks after deadline. The Justice Department has reviewed nearly 13,000 documents related to accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, and 2 million more records are under various phases of review, weeks after a congressional deadline to release all the records according to a court filing. Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche notified a judge that 400 lawyers and 100 document analysts were reviewing the documents to ensure the names of accusers are redacted. This work has required and will continue to require substantial department resources, Bondi and Blanche told U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmayer in New York on January 5th. The department remains committed to providing as much protection to the privacy interests of victims and their relatives as is practical. The court filing marks another delay in releasing documents related to Epstein under a new law. Congressional Democrats and Epstein accusers have criticized the department's pace of releasing documents. We don't even truly know how many more files there are to be released. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat New York, posted on social media, the Trump DOJ's lawlessness must stop. Congress had directed the department to release all its Epstein documents by December 19th and to explain what had been withheld by January 3rd. But officials have said a significant number of documents must still be reviewed. The DOJ revealed December 24th that it had been identified 1 million records from FBI files that hadn't been reviewed, although many were duplicates of previously identified records. The latest filing said that 12,285 documents, totaling 125,575 pages, had been reviewed, but that more than 2 million documents are under various phases of review. The documents include handwritten notes, pictures, and other evidence beside court filings. The records released already have documented Epstein socializing with powerful politicians and business leaders, but not revealed additional suspects, such as 10 suspected co-conspirators. U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton in the Southern District of New York filed the letter from Bondi and Blanche with Engelmayer, one of the 3 judges who allowed the department to release grand jury transcripts and other evidence from cases related to Epstein. Engelmayer oversaw the case against Epstein associate Maxwell, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiring to traffic minors for sex. Displaced survivors face hurdles to return. Insurance battles and bureaucracy have kept many from rebuilding. The smoky stench still lingers here on this stretch of Loma Alta Drive, a year after deadly wildfires rampaged through this once vibrant road of colorful houses. The scars on the landscape and the struggles for residents remain. The January 7, 2025 fires killed more than 30 people, scorched 37,000 acres or almost 58 square miles across 3 weeks of fury. The economic impact is estimated to be between $95 billion and $164 billion. Few have rebuilt houses. The battles with insurance companies persist, as do the bureaucratic hurdles to rebuilding. More than 70% of Eaton and Palisades residents remain displaced by the fires, and many worry about how they'll financially make it till next year. But a certain optimism endures. On a recent December day, faint sounds of construction buzzed in the distance, and then laughter as a group of neighbors who lost their homes in the Eaton fire slowly arrived to survey their property. A few residents, like Ted Kerner, are giving their neighbors hope. Kerner was the first Altadena resident to rebuild, and he sits in his new house. He hopes others will come back soon. I don't know if many of us wanted to know how to build a house, but we have to now, he said. We have no choice. Although they run into each other at public events in Altadena, these neighbors now live in surrounding towns as they navigate the rebuilding process. They are still suffering, both emotionally and financially. Some hope to be in their homes in 2026, others no later than the end of 2027. They would be back faster, but most are still waiting for their home insurance claims check, contemplating whether to hire a lawyer to sue the local utility company or taking the company's pay package, which critics say is insufficient. Meanwhile, California Governor Gavin Newsom continues to push for wildfire-related legislation and to pester the Trump administration and Congress to release nearly $34 billion in federal disaster aid that he requested nearly a year ago. In the Eaton and Palisades fire burn zones, only about half a dozen homes have been rebuilt so far on the more than 9,000 lots. More are on the way, local officials say, but it's been slow. Los Angeles County has approved more than 1,100 rebuilding permits as of January 5th out of 2,900 received, according to county records. Most property owners in Altadena, including 3 of Kerner's neighbors on Loma Alta Drive, have yet to submit their applications. This is an arduous process, no question about it, said Mark Mariscal, a Kerner neighbor who managed to submit his application in December. Make sure we have what we need. Mariscal and his wife Paula, residents of Altadena since 1989, are navigating the rebuilding with their adult daughter and 2 grandkids who live with them. Like many survivors of the Eaton and Palisades wildfires, Mariscal expected more federal disaster funds and state assistance. But with the stalemate in Washington, Mariscal, a retired Los Angeles Parks and Recreation executive, has had to take an aggressive approach regarding their financial needs. Mariscal said it will cost about $1.2 million to rebuild the family's 3-bedroom, 2-bath home on Loma Alta Drive. He went back and forth with 4 different insurance adjusters to ensure he would receive what he was due. I haven't been afraid to go back and say, hey, you're missing this and that, and if you don't make these changes, we're going to file a legal claim, Mariscal said. I hope we don't have to sue, but it's my goal to make sure we have what we need. He, like others in the neighborhood, benefited from GoFundMe.org's Wildfire Relief Fund, which provided more than $8 million in direct cash grants for 7,500 people affected by the wildfires. Still, Mariscal expects to have to contribute about $200,000 of his own money to rebuild the house, which he hopes to complete by the end of 2027. The week before Christmas, Mariscal provided an update at the monthly meeting of the Eaton Fire Collaborative, a group working to help Altadena residents. Members responded to his success with cheers. He urged them all to remain vigilant about their rights. We feel comfortable in that we can move forward. We can breathe a bit, Mariscal said later. Unfortunately, that's just not the case for everybody. I want to help as many people as I possibly can, using savings and taking on debt. Andrew Wessels was luckier than some. His Altadena home is still standing. Still, smoke caused so much damage his family of 4, including 2 school-age kids, was forced to relocate. Wessels, strategy director for the Eaton Fire Survivors Network, a grassroots group of more than 10,000, said he has about $40,000 in debt from fire-related expenses, and his family has moved a dozen times since the disaster. Most of his neighbors are in similar situations. Fire survivors are digging into their savings and taking on debt. More than half have less than a year left of temporary housing funds from their insurance coverage, if they had any at all. 1 in 3 households may have to move again by spring when their remaining housing funds run out. Nearly a quarter of survivors with incomes under $100,000 have had to cut back on buying food, and 15% have had to forego medical care, according to a report by the nonprofit Department of Angels, which supports wildfire victims. Many survivors, like Wessels, have to pay both rent for their temporary housing as well as a mortgage, often on a house that no longer exists. In December, Wessels, the Survivors Network, and other organizations held a news conference to again ask Southern California Edison, the local electric utility, to provide immediate housing assistance for fire survivors. SoCal Edison has not admitted fault, but it has acknowledged that its equipment could be associated with the wildfire spark in Eaton Canyon. Edison International CEO Pedro Pizarro said SoCal Edison created its Wildfire Recovery Compensation Program in July to get survivors their money faster than if they filed a lawsuit and waited for a settlement. But Wessels, who co-wrote a 51-page report, Fix What You Broke, is critical of Edison's compensation program and believes the utility can do more to step up. A state fund established to protect utilities should help refund any money the utility fronts to homeowners, he said. The purpose of the fund is to make sure the utilities remain solvent in case there is a catastrophe, Wessels told USA Today. Edison would get reimbursed, but it appears they don't want to carry this kind of debt. Wessels said the Eaton Fire Survivors Network has a simple proposal. Keep survivors safely housed until they can go home. Advance interim housing support through the same pay now, reconcile later approach the state's other investor-owned utilities have used, and let the wildfire fund reimburse them later, though ratepayers would likely be required to make up the cost eventually. We're not asking charity or for a blank check, Wessels said during a recent news conference. We're asking Edison to fix what it broke, starting with ensuring that every survivor has stable housing, that no survivor is pushed into homelessness. We lost everything. For musician Rashid Ali and his wife, photographer and retired school teacher Gail Nichols Ali, the flashbacks began to strike more often as January 7th, 2026 approached. The couple was celebrating their 43rd wedding anniversary in the Bahamas a year ago when they learned their neighborhood was on fire. Hours later, their son Kareem sent a video showing their home of 30 years reduced to rubble as smoke spread in the background. "Mom, Dad, it's all gone," he told them. Without any place to stay, the couple remained in the Bahamas for 2 more months. The house, 2 vehicles, and artwork were gone, along with Ali's homemade recording studio, several instruments, and the master recordings of his 10 albums. So too were Nicholas Ali's hard drives and countless images. "We lost everything," she said. Revisiting their lot 10 days before Christmas, the couple said they fully intend to rebuild, hoping to enter their new home by Christmas 2026. Despite 2 generous GoFundMe accounts and receiving about 80% of home insurance claim, they are still a couple of $100,000s short of what they need. They are hoping a legal settlement with SoCal Edison and some grants and loans will help offset their rebuilding costs. They are grateful for neighbors like Mariscal who have shared tips for dealing with home insurers, submitting rebuilding permits, and searching for contractors and builders within their budget. On our Facebook and WhatsApp group chats, they constantly say you have to be a pain in their asses, Nicholas Ali said. "Oh, we can do that, no problem," Ali said. "We need every dollar that's owed. Don't play with us." Harder than being persistent, although, is coping with the emotional toll, the loss, the grief, the worry. "We know that some of our neighbors and friends are still grappling with what happened and not ready to move forward," Nichols Ali said. "Yes, it's very traumatic, but we simply don't have that luxury to wait." Will we get our Altadena back? Because he works in Altadena, Boomleen constantly sees the burned-out remnants of his old neighborhood, along with those small, hopeful signs of construction. Surveying his property recently, Lim envisioned what his rebuilt home might look like. A bigger open kitchen, maybe a garage instead of a carport, but he's not ready to make a decision yet. An engineer at Blue Origin, Lim and his wife, Heather, a NASA engineer, are okay with proceeding slowly. They'd rather stay in temporary housing for another year than make a rebuilding decision they'll regret later. Lim 48 said the family is concentrating first on regaining their emotional equilibrium after all they've been through. "My focus is on my family, making sure everything is settled," said Lim, father to daughter Panther 19 and sons Bowen 7 and Neo 4. "This has taken a huge mental toll on us, on everybody." To take care of himself, Lim joined a bi-weekly men's healing circle called DENA Heals. It's a good opportunity to talk about the bonding, the re-strengthening of ourselves, our families, and communities, Lim said. "Everything from our homes, our minds, and our hearts." His family, like many others, are also volunteers. They understand what it's like to be in need. In the past year, Lim, everybody has gone from one side of the line to the other, from accepting help to giving help. "That's what Altadena and Loma Alta Drive were like before the fire," he said. Neighbors would help neighbors. Diversity was their strength. Everybody assumed the best of everyone else. Lim worries about such neighborliness won't be rebuilt along with the houses. Developers are swooping in to purchase vacant lots or buy from homeowners who may not want or can't afford to rebuild. "One of our real concerns is what our communities are going to look like. Will we maintain some of our unique character, our charm?" Lim said. "That's also on a lot of our minds. Will we get our Altadena back?" Doing it for Daisy May, on a recent day, gazing out at sunset from his new home, Kerner acknowledged that he's extremely lucky to be already back on Loma Alta Drive. His newly rebuilt 2,100 160 square foot single-story 3-bedroom 2-bath home, complete with patio and attached garage, looms large amid the ruins along this stretch of road. The house was built in just 4 months, marking the first full rebuild in Altadena since the fire. Coroner, age 67, was determined to have Daisy May, his beloved 13-year-old golden retriever, under a new roof for the 2025 holidays. I owed it to her. Those days of staying in a hotel, then a rental home after the fire were hard, especially when your dog is going on 14, Kerner said. She is the sole justification for why we built so fast. Every day is precious, especially for her. So Kerner, a former executive at a fraud prevention company, used nearly $700,000 of his retirement fund to start construction. He believes that after insurance payments, he'll be set back a few $100,000. He received his rebuilding permits in 9 weeks, hounding Los Angeles County, letting them know his contractors were ready to start. No more excuses, no more runarounds. I'm not married. I have no children, Kerner said, rubbing Daisy May's head as the sun peeked inside the home. I'm deeply and firmly attached to my dog and grateful to live in this space. On December 4th, 2025, Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger and other officials presented Kerner with a certificate of occupancy during a ceremony outside his home, flanked by media and other fire survivors. Mariscal, who lived down the road from Kerner and attended the ceremony, marveled at his neighbor's resolve and willingness to take a financial risk. He had the means and the motivation, Mariscal said. His house allows us to dream about the possibilities. For his part, Kerner said he'd happy to be back, but it's sometimes hard to be the trailblazer, the first one to return to a neighborhood that has been the site of so much tragedy. I'm sorry that so many people are suffering, Kerner said a little more than a week after moving in, choking up as Daisy May scampered across the front lawn. I drive down the street and I get so excited when I see framing for a new house go up, and then the next 15 blocks are deserted and weeds are popping up on their properties. So my emotions go up and down very quickly, Kerner said, wiping a tear. It's still a process for all of us. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. U.S. action in Panama offers clues to outcome in Venezuela. Gunfire in the streets of a Latin American capital, U.S. military troops swooping in by helicopter, a foreign leader accused of drug trafficking hauled off to America in handcuffs. The Trump administration's capture of President Nicolas Maduro on January 3rd bore some familiar echoes to the 1989 invasion of Panama that ousted military strongman Manuel Noriega and marked the most direct U.S. intervention in Latin America since. But experts say that despite some similarities, the two key moments in America's long and checkered history of interventions differ in major ways that could make achieving U.S. goals more challenging this time after a raid that has rived regional anxiety. President Donald Trump said January 3rd that his administration will run the country for a time and described it an apparent nation-building effort. He said it would be funded by Venezuela's vast oil reserves to be tapped by American oil companies, some of which were forced out in the 2000s. Though many in Panama view Noriega's ouster as setting in on a path to become a growing and stable democracy despite the deaths and trauma, that result is far less certain in a much bigger and complex nation beset by poverty, crime, and lingering resistance, experts say. Shaping a post-invasion future was a much easier task in relatively tiny Panama, in part because American troops linked to the Panama Canal were there before and after the invasion, said Will Freeman, a Latin American fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Though details remain scant, Freeman said he doubts the United States will field a full Iraq-style occupation force. This is not going to be so simple in Venezuela, he said. One, it's not even likely that we get to democracy, and two, many of the problems that were there with Maduro are going to remain. Leaders try in vain to flee. Trump's announcement of the raid came 36 years after the United States took Noriega into custody. The famously acne-pocked military strongman was once a U.S. ally who had been recruited by the CIA to staunch the spread of communism, but he drew increasing U.S. ire for growing hostility in actions such as annulling an election and cracking down violently on opposition. In 1989, President George H.W. Bush, citing authoritarian rule, concerns about the security of the Panama Canal and U.S. drug trafficking and money laundering charges, ordered Operation Just Cause. It tapped more than 20,000 U.S. troops, many of them already in Panama, to seize control of military and infrastructure sites. A new president was sworn in soon after. Maduro's capture also stems from a history of conflict with the United States. Maduro came to power as a successor to President Hugo Chavez, a socialist leader who gained leadership in the late 1990s. The nation had since faced a mix of authoritarianism and skyrocketing poverty, crime, and inflation. Like Noriega, Maduro was indicted by U.S. prosecutors in 2020 on drug trafficking charges, but he was a less significant figure in drugs than Noriega or Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, whom Trump recently pardoned, said Michael Shifter, an adjunct professor at Georgetown University's Walsh School of Foreign Service. Pressure to oust Maduro gains steam since Trump's re-election last year, and in recent months a U.S. military buildup in the region included aircraft carriers and fatal military strikes on small boats suspected of carrying drugs. Air Force General Dan Razin-Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said U.S. authorities spent time tracking Maduro's daily routines and moves before the raid in which Maduro was captured by American Special Forces at his compound. As U.S. forces cut power and descended on Maduro, the military encountered some resistance, including a helicopter struck by a bullet, and returned fire. Maduro did not make it to a reinforced steel safe room he was trying to reach, Kane said. Images and video showed explosions, burning vehicles, plumes of smoke rising over the capital city of Caracas, and a swarm of low-flying helicopters. By that night, Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were in New York, where he stands accused of trafficking cocaine during a 25-year career in public posts. More than 3 decades earlier, Noriega also tried to slip away, driving through the streets to evade capture and eventually hiding in the Vatican embassy on December 24th. Surrounded by U.S. forces who couldn't storm the site, the U.S. military blasted constant music by Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath on loudspeakers. According to official accounts, he surrendered on January 3, 1990. Noriega was convicted and spent the rest of his life in U.S., French, and Panamanian prisons. He died in 2017. Criticisms and complications. Both attacks were part of a century-long history of U.S. intervention, directly and indirectly, in the politics of Latin American countries such as Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. In the 1950s, for example, the United States sought to remove Guatemala's democratically elected president amid land reforms that were affecting the U.S.-based United Fruit Company's exploitative labor practices. The United States helped install a military dictatorship whose policies eventually triggered a civil war and led to mass human rights abuses. More than 200,000 Guatemalans were killed or simply disappeared. During the Panama invasion, at least 514 Panamanian soldiers and civilians were killed. Some local reports, however, put the figure at double that. 23 U.S. military personnel were killed, and the event was viewed by opponents as another example of the United States ignoring the sovereignty of nations. At that time, the United States sought to carry out a relatively quick intervention at a time when leaders were keen to avoid a quagmire, said Eduardo Gamarra, a professor of politics and international relations at Florida International University. In contrast, the Trump administration has turned away from the post-Cold War international order in actions and policies that have also drawn comparison to President Theodore Roosevelt's take on the Monroe Doctrine that the United States should exercise international police power to end what Roosevelt called chronic unrest or wrongdoing in the hemisphere. And it comes as some countries in Latin America have made a move to right-leaning governments. More were heading away from authoritarian leadership during the time of the Panama invasion, Gamarra said. Trump has criticized Venezuela, which nationalized its oil industry in the 1970s, for added expropriations and other changes in the 2000s that forced many major U.S. oil companies out and led to legal battles over compensation. Though Trump said his administration plans to oversee Venezuela, U.S. forces have no control over the country itself, Reuters reports, though Trump didn't rule out having some boots on the ground. We will run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition, Trump said at a news conference January 3rd. Trump also said that Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez had no choice but to be cooperative, but Rodriguez appeared on Venezuelan television Saturday afternoon with other top officials to decry what she called a kidnapping. Venezuela is a special case. The administration's efforts will face complexities not present in Panama decades ago, such as the presence of large oil reserves and security challenges from criminal groups to illegal mining interests, Shifter said. Uncertainty also stems from mixed reactions, some celebrating hopes for new freedom and others saying a line had been crossed. Is a region where the military action revived anxieties about past U.S. interventions. In Panama, which has drawn the spotlight of the Trump administration over immigration and canal oversight, Panama's president, Jose Raul Molino, weighed in on social media that included support of the democratic process and the acceptance of the legitimate wishes of the Venezuelan people. Though the invasion of Panama 36 years ago wasn't widely seen as a precursor to other interventions, Trump's rhetoric aimed at Colombia, Mexico, and Cuba over various disputes, and including illegal drugs, has left some countries on edge. U.S. military intervention in the region has not always had a very happy record, and so I think that creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of apprehension, Shifter said. If there are no limits and no rules, why can't Trump do the same to them? HHS revises childhood vaccine schedule. The CDC's revised recommendations put doubt in parents' minds and make it harder for kids to get these recommended and needed vaccines. Dr. Philip Huang. Changes may lead to confusion, medical experts say. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services on January 6th said it was revising its childhood immunization schedule to recommend 4 fewer vaccines. But what does that mean for parents and their children 18 and younger? According to the HHS announcement, the 4 vaccines include those for rotavirus, influenza, meningococcal disease, and hepatitis A, which have now been moved to shared decision-making between parents and healthcare providers, not an outright recommendation. And here's what we know. What were the recommendations before the latest revisions? Previously, the rotavirus vaccine, which protects against contagious gastrointestinal infections that cause diarrhea among infants and young children, was recommended for children between and beginning at 2 months old for either a 2-dose or 3-dose series. For influenza or flu, vaccines were generally recommended for children starting at 6 months. The United States is in the midst of a flu surge with a high number of cases. Meningococcal disease, a serious bacterial infection, can be prevented through 3 types of vaccines. Recommendations previously covered all preteens and teens, as well as children 2 months through 10 years old at increased risk. Hepatitis A recommendations previously included a 2-dose series starting at 12 months. Now, rather than recommending the above vaccines, the HHS advises making a decision in conjunction with your healthcare provider. In the announcement on January 6th, officials said immunizations recommended for all children would still include vaccines for measles, mumps, rubella, polio, pertussis, tetanus, diphtheria, Haemophilus influenza type B or HIB, pneumococcal disease, human papillomavirus or HPV, and varicella or chickenpox. Can I still get these vaccines for my kids, and will insurance pay? So far, the answer is yes. Insurance providers will continue covering immunization costs regardless of the category, senior HHS officials told reporters on a call. From COVID-19 to HPV, other childhood vaccine changes. Last year, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention also changed recommendations for the Hep B and COVID-19 shots. Changes to hepatitis B vaccines first came last year when the CDC officially ended a long-standing recommendation that all newborns receive the vaccine at birth, leaving it instead to parents in consultation with a healthcare provider to decide. For COVID-19, advice has also varied recently. Last year, the CDC recommended people make individual informed decisions about COVID-19 vaccination, declining to specifically recommend it. This is a change from previous guidance since it drops recommendations for even children at high risk. The American Academy of Pediatrics shared its own vaccine recommendations that, for the first time in 3 decades, differed from U.S. government advice by strongly recommending COVID-19 shots for children ages 6 months to 2 years old. For older children, shots are also advised, but it's up to parents' discretion, the AAP said. In the latest announcement, there also appears to be a change for the human papillomavirus or HPV vaccine. Now only 1 dose is recommended, whereas previously it was a 2 or 3 dose series depending on age at initial vaccination. Lives are now at risk. What does this mean for public health? This move, which comes a month after President Donald Trump called for reducing the number of vaccines in children's schedules, advances one of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s long-term goals, but public health experts say this is at the expense of children's health. In a statement to USA Today, Michelle Slavosky, executive director for the organization Families Fighting Flu, said American children's lives are now at risk. Our organization was founded by families who had young children die of the flu, and today, more than 20 years later, we are devastated to see our nation's public health officials cavalierly dismiss the importance of vaccinations that help protect children from diseases. Slavosky continued that the CDC is announcing this change during one of the earliest surges in flu cases, already exceeding the numbers of illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths at the same time as last year is even more disturbing. In a statement shared on January 6, Dr. Andrew D. Racine, president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, said the changes are dangerous and unnecessary. Other public health officials worry that shifting recommendations will confuse parents and families who could benefit from immunization. Parents want what's best for their kids, and that's what public health physicians want also, said Dr. Philip Huang, director of Dallas Health and Human Services. The CDC's revised recommendations put doubt in parents' minds and make it harder for kids to get these recommended and needed vaccines. Huang added that the vaccines have been so effective that they've sharply reduced public health threats such as infections from hepatitis A and B. We're a victim of our own success, said Huang. People forget or don't know what things were like before we had these vaccines. The decision to remove the vaccines from the schedule also occurred outside the typical process for vaccine recommendations, in which an outside panel of expert advisors considers the merits of each vaccine with an eye toward public health. Is the revised vaccine schedule the same as in Denmark? While the administration says this updated vaccine schedule aligns the country with other developed nations like Denmark, experts have criticized this approach, explaining that the reasoning is faulty given the differences between the two countries. The United States is not Denmark, and there is no reason to impose the Danish immunization schedule on America's families. America is a unique country, and Denmark's population, public health infrastructure, and disease risk differ greatly from our own, Racine said in his statement. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 30 minutes after the hour. Poll. 1 in 3 Americans back Trump's action against Maduro, yet 72% worry about U.S. role in Venezuela. 1 in 3 Americans approve of a U.S. military strike to remove Nicolas Maduro from the presidency of Venezuela to face federal drug trafficking charges, according to a Reuters Ipsos poll released on January 5th. In contrast, 72% of respondents worried about the United States becoming too involved in the South American country. The 2-day poll found a sharp partisan divide over the raid that President Donald Trump ordered. With his approval rating at 42%, the results found 65% of Republicans backed the military operation, compared to 11% of Democrats and 23% of independents. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, pleaded not guilty in federal court in New York on January 5th to charges of narco-terrorism, cocaine importation, conspiracy, and 2 weapon counts. I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still president of my country, Maduro said through an interpreter before being cut off by U.S. District Judge Alvin Hellerstein. His lawyer, Barry Pollock, said Maduro will challenge the legitimacy of his military abduction. The military action against Maduro came as Trump has talked about his belief that the Cuban government is toppling and the importance of a U.S. control over Greenland. The poll found 43% of Republicans agreed with the statement. The United States should have a policy of dominating affairs in the Western Hemisphere, compared with 19% who disagreed. The rest said they were unsure or did not answer the question. The poll of 1,248 adults conducted on January 4th and 5th found Trump's approval rating at 42%, the highest since October. Each of the results of the poll conducted online had a margin of 3 percentage points. World leaders mixed over Maduro's capture, China among nations to condemn U.S. actions. The Trump administration's capture of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro is getting mixed reviews on the world stage as country leaders start coming forward since the January 3rd attack. China was among several countries that condemned U.S. actions, though other nations responded with messages of support or appeared to struggle to find the right words to describe the unusual use of force against a sovereign country and its president. Speaking in Beijing on January 5th, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi accused the United States of behaving like a world judge by seizing Venezuela's leader and putting him on trial in New York. The sovereignty and security of all countries should be fully protected under international law, Wang added. China's foreign ministry spokesperson Lin Yayin said at separate press briefing on January 5th that China was still maintaining positive communication and cooperation with the Venezuelan government. In Moscow, Russia's foreign ministry and Maduro's capture represented an unacceptable encroachment on the sovereignty of an independent state and accused the United States of committing an act of armed aggression. There also was a strong rebuke from Iran, where Trump had also threatened to intervene if Tehran's authorities kill additional protesters who had taken to the streets in recent nationwide demonstrations. Iran called the U.S. operation, which saw Maduro and his wife seized, blindfolded, and sent by ship to New York to face narco-terrorism charges, a flagrant violation of the country's national sovereignty. Maduro pleaded not guilty in federal court on January 5th on U.S. drug trafficking charges. Many Latin American leaders also criticized the operation against Venezuela. We express our deep concern and rejection of the military actions carried out unilaterally in the territory of Venezuela, which contravene fundamental principles of international law. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Uruguay said in a joint statement. Such actions set an extremely dangerous precedent for regional peace and security and for the rules-based international order, in addition to endangering the civilian population. The U.S. seizure of Maduro and his wife has raised thorny legal questions about whether it violated international laws that govern the U.S. of force against another country and its leadership. Still, there also was what appeared to be strong backing for the operation. Argentinian President Javier Milei, a close ally of Trump, wrote on social media that freedom moves forward and long live freedom. And in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated Trump for what he described as his bold and historic leadership on behalf of freedom and justice. I salute your decisive resolve and the brilliant action of your brave soldiers, Netanyahu said. European leaders seem to avoid committing themselves to one side or another and used more ambiguous language. I want to establish the facts first. I want to speak to President Trump. I want to speak to allies, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said in a statement. I always say and believe we should all uphold international law. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said the legal assessment of the U.S. operation was complex and we will take our time to evaluate it. A transition to a government legitimized by elections must be ensured, he said. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, writing on the social media platform X, said that his country did not recognize the Maduro regime, but neither will it recognize an intervention that violates international law and pushes the region toward a horizon of uncertainty and belligerence. Kelly responds to threat of demotion. Senator takes to Daily Show to criticize Trump. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly said he would do everything in my power to stop the U.S. Department of Defense from demoting him in retirement during an episode of The Daily Show on January 5th. Kelly's comments came hours after Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth backed off previous court-martial threats for his role in a video telling service members they can refuse illegal orders. He added that the threats levied by Hegseth were a reflection of the person at the top, referring to President Donald Trump. This guy, Trump, is surrounded by a bunch of yes men. They didn't like that I said that, the senator from Arizona told The Daily Show host Jon Stewart. Stewart, who was unsparing in his assessment, said the episode speaks of something inherent in the character of this administration and that its fragility, adding that this smacks of weakness and fear. On November 18th, Kelly and 5 other Democratic lawmakers released a video telling service members they have the right not to obey orders they believe are illegal. Trump subsequently accused the lawmakers in the video of seditious behavior punishable by death in a November 20th post on Truth Social. The president later claimed that he wasn't threatening death on the lawmakers in a November 21 interview on Fox News Radio. The Pentagon later announced that it was investigating Kelly for serious allegations of misconduct, and on January 5th, Hegseth said that he levied a censure against Kelly and began administrative proceedings to demote him. Demotion process remains unclear. Demoting Kelly requires an administrative process known as officer grade determination, which by law makes its decisions based on an officer's conduct while on active duty. It's not clear how the Navy can legally consider Kelly's post-retirement conduct when making its determination. According to federal law and Navy regulations, Navy Secretary John Flynn decides the retired rank of officers below the grade of Vice Admiral. In most cases, an administrative board reviews an officer's conduct before making a recommendation to Flynn. Retroactive reductions of retired officers are rare and typically reserved for serious misconduct from their time in uniform. A retired Army 2-star general was demoted to second lieutenant in 2021 after a Virginia court convicted him of raping his daughter throughout her childhood. In the January 5th interview, Kelly reiterated his description of Hegseth as the most unqualified Secretary of Defense in our country's history. From a post on X earlier in the day, and said the fight was not just about me. He doesn't know what he's doing, Kelly said of Hegseth, but there is tremendous power in that position. I will do everything that's appropriate in this circumstance to make sure that they know that this is unacceptable, that they cannot do this to people, but also make sure that the American people know that you can't be stifling people's freedom of speech, Kelly said. Corporation for Public Broadcasting votes to dissolve. Congress voted in July to claw back $1.1 billion in funding. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has announced its board voted to dissolve the nearly 60-year-old organization, attributing the decision to a lack of federal funding and sustained political attacks. Such factors make it impossible for CPB to continue operating as the Public Broadcasting Act intended, according to a news release announced on January 5th. The 1967 legislation established the Corporation for Public Broadcasting as a nonprofit and non-governmental organization tasked in part with developing programs of high quality, diversity, creativity, excellence, and innovation, with a strict adherence to objectivity and balance in all programs or series of programs of a controversial nature. Over the decades, the programs that aired on PBS with support from the organization included such children's programming as Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Arthur, cooking shows by luminaries such as Julia Child, documentaries from Frontline, science programs such as Nova, and masterpiece dramas. Federal funding also supported a public alert system to warn viewers and public radio listeners of impending dangers. President Donald Trump called for the federal government to stop funding National Public Radio and PBS, which received operating money from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Trump claimed neither entity presents a fair, accurate, or unbiased portrayal of current events to tax-paying citizens. Congress voted in July to claw back $1.1 billion that had been earmarked for public broadcasting over the next 2 years, prompting the corporation to announce the next month that it was starting an orderly wind-down. Organization employees were told August 1st that most of the roughly 100 staff positions would be slashed by the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. Some staff would remain through January 2026. The corporation's news release said to ensure a responsible and orderly closeout of operations. More than 70% of its federal funding went to local public media stations, the corporation said. In the January 5th statement, Patricia Harrison, the corporation's president, applauded the service provided to Americans regardless of geography, income, or background over the decades. When the administration and Congress rescinded federal funding, our board faced a profound responsibility. CPB's final act would be to protect the integrity of the public media system and the democratic values by dissolving rather than allowing the organization to remain defunded and vulnerable to additional attacks, she said. Corporation for Public Broadcasting Chair Ruby Calvert called the developments devastating to public media. Yet even in this moment, I am convinced that public media will survive and that a new Congress will address public media's role in our country because it is crucial to our children's education, our history, cultural, and democracy to do so. The corporation said its orderly closure would include distributing remaining money and supporting the American Archive of Public Broadcasting in its efforts to preserve historic content. It has partnered with the University of Maryland to preserve its archives. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Jury selection starts for Uvalde ex-cop. He faces 29 counts from the 2022 shooting response. Jury selection in the trial of a police officer involved in the response to the 2022 mass school shooting in Uvalde, Texas began January 5th. Adrian Gonzalez faces 29 counts of abandoning or endangering a child, according to court documents in Texas's 38th Judicial District Court in Corpus Christi. He was employed as a police officer with the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District when the deadly mass shooting occurred on May 24, 2022, at Robb Elementary School. He has pleaded not guilty, according to NBC News. The Robb Elementary School shooting is the worst mass shooting at an educational institution in Texas history. On that day, a gunman armed with a semi-automatic rifle killed 19 fourth graders and 2 of their teachers before he was killed by officers more than an hour after the shooting began. The case was transferred from Uvalde to Corpus Christi earlier this year as the officer's lawyers argued he could not receive a fair trial in Uvalde, according to the Associated Press. Visiting Judge Sid Harley, whom Governor Greg Abbott reappointed in September, told jurors that they needed to remain fair during what he called a very high-profile case, according to WFAA-TV in Dallas. How long is the trial expected to take? Harley told jurors to expect a 2-week trial. About 150 potential jurors have been dismissed out of roughly 450 people that comprised the pool earlier in the day, according to a 4 p.m. CT update from WFAA-TV. Harley proceeded quickly through the jury selection process and was expected to seat a jury by the end of the day to begin hearing opening statements on January 6th, the news outlet reported. However, no jurors have been seated as of late afternoon. The tone in the central jury room was impassioned, with many potential jurors getting upset over some of the prosecutor's questions. The jury pool listened intently, with some people staying quiet while many others clapped and expressed anger when they heard the comments of other prospective jurors. Several of the potential jurors spoke critically of law enforcement who responded to the shooting, saying they had not done enough to protect the children and staff. A handful said they could not be impartial in a trial because they or their loved ones are teachers. One prospective juror objected to how the criminal charges are being directed at Gonzalez when he was not the only law enforcement officer at the scene of the shooting. When Uvalde County Assistant District Attorney Bill Turner asked if they'd heard enough to make a decision, many potential jurors raised their hands, according to WFAA-TV. The judge told jurors earlier in the day that an indictment does not mean a presumption of guilt, and that it will be up to the state to prove the case without a reasonable doubt. Jurors won't hear the punishment phrase of the case, meaning that while they'll determine whether Gonzalez is guilty or innocent, the judge will impose the sentence. Trial revives police criticisms. Law enforcement agencies that converged on Robb Elementary after the shooting began have been under criticism since for waiting 77 minutes to confront the gunman. A 2024 Department of Justice report found that 11 officers from the Uvalde School District and Uvalde Police Department arrived on the scene within 3 minutes of the shooter's entry into the school. 5 advanced initially and 2 were hit by shrapnel. Police made 3 attempts to enter the classrooms, which are adjoined by an interior door. Pete Arredondo, the chief officer of the Uvalde School Police Department, directed officers at several points to delay making entry into classrooms in favor of searching for keys and clearing other classrooms, the report found. He
He also tried to negotiate with the shooter and treated him as a barricaded subject instead of a continuing threat to children and school staff, the report says. Victims who had died were put on ambulances and sent to hospitals, while injured students were evacuated in buses. One adult victim was placed on a walkway on the ground to be attended to, where she later died. Law enforcement response at Robb Elementary School on May 24th and in the hours and days after was a failure that should not have happened. Then Attorney General Merrick Garland told reporters and Uvalde community members at the time of the report's release. Surveillance video footage, first obtained by the Austin American-Statesman and Austin ABC affiliate KVUE nearly 7 months after the carnage, shows dozens of heavily armed and body armor-clad officers from local, state, and federal agencies in helmets walking the hallway. Some left the camera's frame and reappeared. Others trained their weapons toward the classroom, talked, made cell phone calls, sent texts, and looked at floor plans, but did not enter or try to enter classrooms. Gonzalez and Arredondo are only officers charged in connection with the 2022 shooting, according to the Texas Tribune. Arredondo was charged with similar counts of child endangerment and abandonment, according to the Tribune, and his trial has not been scheduled. The newspaper reported that Arredondo is also seeking a change of venue. Search for mountain lions ends after hiker fatally attacked on trail. CO officials reopen trail after thorough effort. Colorado wildlife authorities have ended their search for mountain lions along a hiking trail where a woman was killed in a mountain lion attack on New Year's Day, the state's first fatal attack since 1999. Colorado Parks and Wildlife launched an extensive search for the mountain lion involved in the attack, and 2 mountain lions were found in the area of the Crozier Mountain Trail on January 1st. They were both euthanized in accordance with agency policy. Kara Van Hoos, a spokesperson for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, told the Coloradian part of the USA Today network. On January 5th, the state wildlife authorities said they ended an active search for a 3rd mountain lion in the area. The agency said the trail was reopened to the public and advised visitors to report mountain lion sightings or incidents to wildlife authorities. Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers, federal agency staff, and houndsmen with trained dogs searched thoroughly for more than 72 hours, the agency said in a news release. No fresh tracks or scents were detected. 2 hikers discovered the woman's body on the Crozier Mountain Trail just south of Glen Haven in Larimer County at around noon local time on January 1st. According to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the trail is about 70 miles northwest of Denver. The hikers, including a physician, saw a mountain lion laying over the woman from about 100 yards away. Van Hoos said they threw rocks at the animals as they approached, and the mountain lion was scared away. It was acting protectively over the person, Van Hoos said, adding that the physician attended to the woman but did not find a pulse. Local coroner identifies victim killed in mountain lion attack. The Larimer County Coroner's Office said it was responded to the Glen Haven Fire Station on January 1st to investigate the death of a 46-year-old woman. The coroner's office confirmed that the woman was a victim of a fatal mountain lion attack at the Crozier Mountain Trail and had been transported to the Glen Haven Fire Station for safety measures. On January 5th, the coroner's office identified the woman as Kristen Marie Kovach of Fort Collins, Colorado. Kovach died of asphyxia due to having her neck compressed, the coroner's office said in a statement. Her injuries were consistent with a mountain lion attack, and her death was ruled an accident, according to the coroner's office. Our hearts go out to the victim's family, Mark Leslie, regional manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife's Northeast region, said in a statement. This is a terrible tragedy. This hiker did what many people did on New Year's Day. She went out in nature on the first day of the new year, and the fact that she did not return to her family and friends is nothing short of heartbreaking, Leslie continued. We encourage the public to have compassion and empathy for her and her loved ones. Necropsy finds human DNA on a euthanized male mountain lion. After the 2 hikers discovered the victim and called 911, state wildlife authorities said if officers arrived at the scene and saw a male mountain lion approaching the area. The mountain lion was shot by an officer and ran off. Wildlife officers and houndsmen then tracked the mountain lion, which was wounded by the early officer's shot, and euthanized it, according to the agency. A 2nd mountain lion was also spotted in close vicinity to the scene and was euthanized by wildlife authorities. Shortly after, officers observed a 3rd mountain lion in the area, and it was pursued by hounds, the agency said, but wildlife officers were unable to track and locate the mountain lion. Due to multiple lions present at the attack area and evidence found at the scene, Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers suspected a family group was responsible, the agency said. Initial necropsy results revealed on January 5th showed that 2 euthanized mountain lions were members of the same family group consisting of an approximately 1-year-old male and 1-year-old female. The necropsy found human DNA on all 4 paws of the male mountain lion, and no human DNA was detected on the female mountain lion, according to the agency. Both mountain lions tested negative for rabies. It is very unlikely that these lions were in such close proximity to the scene by coincidence, Leslie said. This is not a decision we take lightly. Given the gravity of this situation and the rarity of this type of behavior, this was a necessary, if unfortunate, action. How rare are fatal attacks? Before the attack January 1st, Van Hoos told the Coloradian that there had been 28 mountain lion attacks on humans in Colorado, including 3 that were fatal. The last incident, which was non-fatal, occurred in 2023 near the mountain town of Buena Vista, more than 175 miles southwest of the Crozier Mountain Trail. The state's last fatal mountain lion attack was in October of 1999, when 3-year-old Jared Tadero went missing while hiking with a group on the Big South Trail in the Roosevelt National Forest of Larimer County. His body was discovered by 2 hikers near where he was last seen in June of 2003. MAHA outrage kills contentious pesticide provision, a controversial provision that critics said would have shielded big chemical companies from liability and regulatory scrutiny, have been nixed from a package of annual funding bills that lawmakers hope will stave off another government shutdown at the end of the month. The removal of the measure comes after a chorus of outrage from activists, including those aligned with the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again agenda, as well as lawmakers from within the president's own party. It was the latest example in the Congress of a contentious proposal finding its way into a must-pass appropriations bill at the 11th hour. Other measures related to aviation safety and the ability of lawmakers to sue the Department of Justice also have threatened the success of such legislation in recent months. Experts argued the pesticides proposal, known as Section 453, would have tied regulators' hands at the Environmental Protection Agency by not allowing them to update warnings in a timely fashion. They're giving the middle finger to MAHA, conservative commentator Brett Cooper recently said on Fox News of lawmakers who introduced the provision. Rep. Thomas Massie, R. Kentucky, a frequent critic of President Donald Trump, pledged to sponsor an amendment to strike the language from the legislation, which has to pass Congress before January 30th to avoid a partial lapse in federal funding. Other House Republicans, including Republican Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, were preparing to take action too. This is completely wrong, and some of these pesticides are linked to cancer and infertility, the Congresswoman wrote on social media January 5th. Why on earth would we want to shield the companies? Lobbying groups from the pesticides industry argued the measure would not have directly impacted any current or future litigation and instead simply would have reaffirmed existing federal law. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from USA Today for January 7th on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As of this year, our agency has broadcast more than 300,000 hours of radio readings. Volunteer radio readers read newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Reading's broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading broadcasts from studios at 1199 Harlem Road in suburban Buffalo. Please let others know about Radio Reading. It's your service. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555.
will continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Dan Arth. Sports. Article by Jarrett Bell. Questions for the 14 on the road to Super Bowl 60. Now comes the real drama. After such a wild, unpredictable NFL regular season, the road to Super Bowl 60 is set up to be one of the most wide-open playoff tournaments in recent history, I think. Who you got? You can surely make cases for several teams to wind up seizing the Lombardi Trophy at Levi's Stadium on February 8th, and you might be right. Then again, no team is perfect, no team is dominant, and Patrick Mahomes is not a factor this time around. There are flaws, questions, and what-ifs for every team in the field, such as, number one, can the Philadelphia Eagles flick a switch that takes them back to the Super Bowl? They have looked like anything but defending champs, yet still have a Vic Fangio coordinated defense to be reckoned with. Whatever happened to Saquon Barkley? After cracking Y2K last season, he's rushed for a little more than half that beyond an out-of-sync line. He has to be the ticket for a Jalen Hurts-led unit that has lacked big play rhythm. 2, does it matter that Patriots quarterback Drake May has 0 playoff experience? Well, we'll see. A few months ago, few, if any, saw, quote, MVP candidate in the second-year pro. He has grown up in a hurry, with props to Mike Vrabel and offensive coordinator Josh McDaniel. And remember, TB12 had no playoff experience when he won a Super Bowl in year 2. The bigger swing factor could involve top defenses like the units in Denver and Houston. 3, what more can Kyle Shanahan squeeze from the injury-stung 49ers? For a 2-time Super Bowl coach, this might be Shanahan's best work yet. Never mind the lack of pass rush, with Nick Bosa among casualties alongside heart and soul linchpin Fred Warner. They were 1 win from the number 1 seed. Now the watch list includes Trent Williams with a hamstring and whatever creativity Shanahan can unleash in a pinch. 4, can Josh Allen cover for the shaky Bills' run defense? With playoff nemesis Mahomes not in the mix this time, you can't blame the reigning NFL MVP for licking his chops like this might be the Super Bowl year. Yet the 28th ranked run D, yielding 5.1 yards per rush, has allowed a few running backs rip off the type of huge yardage games, 169, 170, 174, 148, that could be disastrous in the playoffs. 5, does Aaron Rodgers have a storybook script for the Pittsburgh Steelers? We saw why Mike Tomlin lured A-Rod to Pittsburgh with his poise in the clutch on Sunday night. Rodgers, 42, came for a shot at chasing another championship. The odds are so long, beginning with a matchup against Houston's number 1 defense. But Rodgers, leading a 25th ranked unit, can tell you all about the time he won the Super Bowl as a 6th seed. Number 6, do the Packers stand a chance without Micah Parsons? When Green Bay obtained the All-Pro edge rusher in August, it was viewed as the missing piece for a championship puzzle. His impact, including 12.5 sacks, was substantial, as is his absence. Since Parsons went down with a torn ACL in Week 15, the Packers have not won. The 4-game losing streak is longest for any playoff team. Number 7, will special teams cost the Rams again? In the Week 16 meltdown loss at Seattle, Los Angeles gave up a 58-yard punt return TD, and Harrison Mevis missed a 48-yard field goal try with 2:07 left in regulation. The mishaps cost coordinator Chase Blackburn his job, the first in-season staff firing ever by Sean McVay. As S-team gaffes have plagued the Rams all season, For all the pop on offense and defense, it takes 3 phases. What makes the Jaguars, number 8, what makes the Jaguars so dangerous? Beyond the hot quarterback, Trevor Lawrence has a 15-1 TD interception ratio since Week 13, and a defense that thrives on turnovers, 31 second in the NFL, while stuffing the run, 0 75-yard rushers. Consider quality wins. The Jags are 3-1 against other AFC playoff teams, splitting against Houston while posting convincing wins against the Chargers and the Broncos. Number 9, did the Panthers peak a few weeks ago? Backing into the playoffs with a losing record, gee, thanks Atlanta, and back-to-back losses to end the regular season is never a good look. But now, here come the Rams, bringing the NFL's number 1 offense. Well, wait a minute. Carolina upset LA on November 30th to improve to 7-6. That was then. Since then, the Panthers haven't scored more than 20 points in dropping 3 of their last 4 games. Number 10, have the Bears run out of last-minute magic? What an incredible worst-to-first rise in year 1 under Ben Johnson. Sort of like destiny. Chicago is the first team in NFL history to win 6 games in which it trailed in the final 2 minutes. Caleb Williams' armed crunch time confidence, check. Just as essential, a 29th ranked defense has collected an NFL high 33 takeaways. This is not a typical formula, but they are here. Number 11, will Justin Herbert hold up and give the Chargers a fighting chance? Jim Harbaugh's rugged quarterback had surgery in early December to stabilize a fractured left hand and didn't miss a start until resting in Week 18. Add layer to his toughness rep, which fits in a year his O-line lost both of its stud tackles to season-ending injuries. Under these conditions, Herbert tries to shake the 0-2 playoff monkey off his back. Number 12, what can C.J. Stroud do to complement the top-ranked Texans defense? Sure, defense wins championships, and Houston set franchise records for fewest points, 17.3, and fewest yards allowed, 277.2. To fortify an NFL best 9-game winning streak. Stroud rebounded after missing 3 games due to a concussion, but his unit has been sketchy for cashing in opportunities. Houston ranks 30th in the NFL with a red zone TD rate of 46.3%. 13, will the Broncos offense buck a trend and start fast? Denver's journey to a number 1 seed came with 11 one-score victories, tied for the most in the NFL. Impressive. Last season, the Broncos typically lost those one-possession encounters. Now they are so poised in crunch time. Yet stress might be lessened. Denver has generated just 36 points from its opening possession, including just 3 TDs. And finally, number 14, what's the warning sign attached to the Seahawks? Turnovers. No playoff team logged more giveaways than Seattle at 28, with half of that total coming on interceptions by Sam Darnold, who has thrown more picks, 14, than any quarterback in the playoffs. Seattle has great balance with top 10 units on offense and defense, plus stellar special teams. It has the 12s, 2. Maybe turnover will be an equalizer, or not. An article from the Life section under Music by Melissa Ruggiero. Amy Grant's 6th of January looks to past, calls out unrest. The sun is shining, the coffee is brewed, and her pajamas are still on at 10 a.m. That means Amy Grant is content. On New Year's Eve day, before preparing for a massive family gathering to celebrate the incoming year with a backyard fire at sunset, Amy Grant is eager to share the story behind her new song, The 6th of January, Yasgur's Farm. The wind-swept folk pop nugget arrives on the day it is named, for a cosmic intertwining Grant 65 embraces and is a precursor to her first new album of original material in more than a decade, due later this year. The song produced Mac McAnally, a 10-time CMA winner and Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, harks back to the idealism of the Woodstock era with its title reference to the famed site of the 1969 culture-shifting music festival. Lyrics name drop John Lennon and Marvin Gaye, along with questioning whether humanity has learned anything in the 50-plus years since Woodstock. All that wide-eyed hope, were we so naive? Grant, a trailblazer in contemporary Christian music, who has sold more than 30 million albums and earned 6 Grammy Awards, induction into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, and a 2022 Kennedy Center honor, didn't write the 6th of January, Yasgur's Farm. Rather, it came quite literally to her doorstep in the form of a friend and Nashville songwriter, Sandy Lawrence. Lawrence, mother-in-law of Jenny Gill, part of Grant's, quote, blended family with husband Vince Gill, arrived at the Grant Gill farm in Franklin, Tennessee, just as Grant was ready to leave for a month of West Coast tour dates. My suitcase is in the front hall, and I opened the door, and there was Sandy holding a strum stick, Grant recalls. She wanted to play a song for me, and I said, I'm leaving for the airport, but let's go to the bedroom and I can film it on my phone. I was so intrigued by the strum stick and the song that when I came back from the tour, I asked her if I could record it. The strum stick, a 3-stringed instrument that produces a sound somewhere between a dulcimer and acoustic guitar, was created by luthier Bob McNally as a less intimidating introduction to the guitar. Grant, an accomplished guitarist since her teen years, wasn't drawn to the instrument for its simplicity, but rather for its unconventional sound, which gives her new song a definitive Joni Mitchell vibe. Yes, Grant has been a fan from before I was 10. One of the primary themes of the 6th of January, Yasgur's Farm, embedded in its chorus is unrest. Hey, mister, where's the road to Yasgur's Farm? He stares at me with pity and alarm, says that crowd left here long ago. More specifically, why it's necessary to contemplate the unrest. I think sitting with unrest is where we can ask important questions. What can I do differently? It can be unrest about anything, Grant says. I can't help but see life through the lens of someone born in 1960, and when I see my children and their children, everything is vying for everyone's attention. Unrest is the invitation to say, what do I have control over, and what choices can I make in the world we live in? We have so much power and influence in our own lives. Grant says that 5 years removed from heart surgery to repair a congenital heart condition and 3.5 years since a serious biking accident knocked her unconscious and required months of rehabilitation, she is feeling great and energized to support her new projects. I've been excited about the things I have my hands on, Grant says. To be creative again, it's a wonderful thing. Picture of Amy Grant with the strumstick. Amy Grant plays the strumstick on her new single, The 6th of January, Yasgur's Farm, named after the site of the Woodstock Festival. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. All right, we are going back to USA Sports. An article on U.S. figure skating by Christine Brennan. U.S. figure skating team might be best ever. The U.S. Figure Skating Championships can best be described as the final dramatic step in the selection of the 16 skaters who will represent the country at the 2026 Winter Olympic Games in Milan, Italy. 3 men and 3 women single skaters will be chosen, as will 3 ice dance teams and 2 pairs, 16 athletes in all. This very well could be the greatest U.S. figure skating team in history, with a fighting chance to win 4 of the 5 gold medals that would be given out in Italy. The previous best performers, 2 golds each, all the way back at the 56 and again at the 1960 Olympics, when there were only 3 figure skating events. Over the next few days, there will be a lot of conversation about what's at stake at the U.S. Olympic figure skating trials in St. Louis. The only problem is that the competition isn't exactly an Olympic trials. We actually already know who some of the U.S. skaters will be at the Olympics. Let's focus on the 2 singles categories, men and women. 2-time world champion and 3-time national champion Ilya Malinin could fall 5 times at this week's national championships and still make the Olympic team. That said, he won't fall 5 times. He probably won't fall at all. He is the self-proclaimed quad god, the 21-year-old jumping dynamo from the Washington, D.C. suburbs who landed a record 7 quadruple jumps in his long program at last month's Grand Prix final. But were he to stumble, it won't matter in terms of his Olympic berth. U.S. figure skating, like some other national governing bodies, does not use the familiar and strict placements of timed sports like swimming and track and field to pick its Olympic team. It's not just about finishing in the top 3. That's helpful, but not the whole story. The USFS selection process includes past performances, focusing on the athlete's body of work over the past 2 seasons. This isn't cheating or unfair. It's often a smart way to pick an Olympic team, but it can trigger some controversy. 4 years ago, Malinin finished 2nd in the men's event at the U.S. Nationals, but was passed over for the Olympic team in favor of a more veteran skater. Given a prodigy like Malinin, Olympic experience at age 17 would have been a great gift for the youngster, but USFS chose a different path. Now, 4 years later, the stakes are still high for Malinin as the pressure builds to Milan. Specifically in this year, being an Olympic year, I really don't want to take any unnecessary risk, especially with me just having new skates right now, he said, referring to the ritual of breaking in a new pair of skates for the rest of the season. So, I'm really trying to play it a little more safe and just think ahead for the Olympics. How I want to put myself at 100% for the Olympics, he said. Jason Brown's Olympic chances. Veteran Jason Brown, 31, a magnificent stylist on the ice and trusted veteran of 2 previous Olympic teams. He was the skater chosen to go to the 2022 Olympics instead of Malinin. Very likely will make the team unless he performs poorly at the Nationals, but the 3rd men's spot is wide open. Which U.S. figure skater will nab final spot on men's side? Two 24-year-old skaters, Andrew Torgashev and Max Naumoff, will likely vie for it. Torgashev finished 2nd at last year's national championships and 3rd in 2023. Naumoff finished 4th at the last 3 nationals. But Naumoff's skating story took an awful turn when his parents, who also were his coaches, were killed in the midair collision over Washington on January 29th, 2025, as they were returning home from the Nationals. For months, Naumoff was uncertain if he wanted to keep competing, but he ultimately returned to the sport. If he makes the U.S. team, there will be no more sentimental or emotional moment in this Olympic season. Amber Glenn's particularly meaningful U.S. Figure Skating Championships. In the women's event for Amber Glenn, the two-time defending women's national champion, a spot on the Olympic team is all but certain, yet because she has had trouble putting together clean programs at key moments, this nationals is especially meaningful. At 26, the age by which some women skating stars have long since retired, it would be her first Winter Games. I have to remind myself that my path has been so different that it's going to be my story, which I'm writing right now, because of course my head automatically goes to this dream, standing in the kiss and cry. Yes, I did it. I won nationals, and I'm going to the Olympics, Glenn said. Those are dream moments that I never thought I would experience, and I have to remind myself, hey, you do what you need to do. I want to go out and have two performances that I enjoy and that I'm proud of, and wherever that lands me, I know that I feel good and I'm happy about it. And I know if I do my job, then I will be more than likely end up being in Milan. And that is more than I ever thought I could accomplish. There's nothing wrong with not winning a national title in the Olympic year. In 2002, Sarah Hughes finished third behind perennial national champion Michelle Kwan and Sasha Cohen at the U.S. Nationals. A month later, Hughes won the Olympic gold in Salt Lake City in a stunning upset. 8 years later, Evan Lysacek finished second in the men's competition at the Nationals, but the next month he won the gold medal at the 2010 Vancouver Games. All right, let's move back to USA Life. Article under Health and Wellness by Charles Trepani. Perception may be a source of age gap discomfort. Kathy Griffin closed out 2025 with a dating revelation. Shortly after her split from ex-husband Randy Bick, she fell for a 23-year-old. I accidentally fell in love with a 23-year-old, the 65-year-old comedian wrote in a piece for The Cut, published on December 31st. But because of his age, he didn't have the usual sexism, misogyny, and biases that guys my age tend to have. He seemed to see me. I know that sounds really corny. Oh, God, it sounds so lame. But I felt really comfortable with him, and I felt very content just hanging out. The relationship was short-lived, Griffin wrote, but she says the two enjoyed each other's company, and she doesn't regret it. I knew he was too young when he told me he never wanted to have kids and that he could be with me forever. And I was like, you don't know that. You're 23. You have no idea, she wrote. So I had to set that dove free. Griffin is far from the only celebrity to pursue romance with someone who is significantly younger than she is. After all, Bill Belichick and his girlfriend Jordan Hudson have a 48-year age gap, made their romance red carpet official in late 2024. And Catherine McPhee and David Foster, who have a 35-year age gap, have been married since 2019. Though age gap relationships aren't necessarily uncommon, they do come with complications that the people in them should be aware of. Often, the biggest challenge isn't the relationship itself, but how other people respond to it. You have to be confident in your relationship. Janet Morrison, a certified sex and relationship coach, previously told USA Today, the biggest external factor that influenced most of these relationships is not the age, but the response and acceptance of the relationship by peers. Griffin and society's age gap obsession. Hollywood has a storied history of famous couples with notable age gaps, such as Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart, 25-year gap, or Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio, 12-year gap. In the modern Hollywood era, Kylie Jenner and Tyga, who met when Jenner was 14, Tyga was 21, and Florence Pugh and Zach Braff, a 21-year gap, have raised eyebrows, as have several of Scott Disick's relationships. Some have called out their former older partners after feeling taken advantage of. Take Demi Lovato's 2022 single, 29, which was adopted by myriad TikTok users calling out their own past relationships. Quote, finally, 29, funny, just like you were at the time. Thought it was a teenage dream, just a fantasy, but was it yours or was it mine? 17, 29. Lovato sings in the song, rumored to be about ex Vilmer Valderrama. When Taylor Swift, 36, released her 2012 album Red in 2021, she updated her breakup ballad, quote, All Too Well, allegedly about actor Jake Gyllenhaal, who is 9 years her senior, to include callouts to an age difference. Media tend to portray age gap romances in a one-dimensional manner. The older man, wealthy and stable, has the power socially, financially, and even sexually, while his attractive, young, dependent trophy wife offers one thing: beauty. Public discourse around age gap relationships also can be brutal when an older woman dates a younger man, as evidenced by the label cougar, which paints older women as wild animals on the prowl. Griffin commented on the double standard older women in age gap relationships face, saying she finds no shame in people calling her a cougar. In fact, she embraces it. I haven't been with a guy my age since I was in my 30s, Griffin wrote, so I'm constantly called a cougar. But I don't mind. I kind of am a cougar, which to me just means you have the freedom to choose the person that you want, as opposed to the age bracket that society tells you is the only option for you. What relationship experts say about age gaps: ultimately, for any couple with an age gap to have a successful romance, it's crucial that both people in the relationship see each other as equals. Where age gap relationships most commonly go wrong is when they veer into toxic power imbalances. In order to avoid this, Megan Gillen, a professor of psychology at Penn State Abington, who studies developmental psychology and body image, previously told USA Today she recommends individuals in age gap relationships stay mindful and evaluate the situation for themselves. Ask yourself, does it feel appropriate? Does it feel comfortable? Do you feel like you can relate to the person, or do you feel like the person has power over you? Younger partners in particular need to stay especially vigilant of potential gender, social, and power dynamics. Ian Kerner, a therapist and sex and relationship specialist, previously told USA Today it also can be hard for couples with large age gaps to integrate family and friends into each other's lives, as well as finding common interests and activities. To combat this, Kerner says it's essential that both people find things they enjoy doing together. Humans find connection in all sorts of places, Eric Anderson, a licensed marriage and family therapist, previously told USA Today. As long as both parties are able to consent, we shouldn't be so critical of relationships. All right, moving over to Lifeline articles. How was your day, Rick Harrison? Rick Harrison kicked off 2026 with a wedding. The 60-year-old Pawn Stars patriarch married financier Angie Polishkin, a 42-year-old nurse. On January 3rd, Harrison's representative confirmed to USA Today the couple told People and TMZ they said "I do" in front of an Elvis impersonator at Little White Wedding Chapel in Las Vegas. They are planning a larger wedding ceremony for this month. Polishkin's engagement ring was, of course, sourced from Harrison's own gold and silver pawn shop. It's your birthday. Who is celebrating today, January 7th? Businessman Jan Wenner turns 80. Singer Kenny Loggins turns 78. Actor, martial artist Sammo Hung, 74. Actor David Caruso, 70. TV anchor Katie Couric, 69. Bassist Kathy Valentine from the Go-Go's, 67. Actor Nicolas Cage, 62. Actor Rex Lee, 57. Actor-rapper Doug E. Doug, 56. Actor Jeremy Renner, 55. Actor Reggie Austin, 47. Actor Lauren Cohan, 44. Actor Brett Dalton, 43. Actor Lindsay Fonseca, 39. actor Marcus Scribner, 26. And you are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 30 minutes after the hour. All right, moving back to sports, USA Sports. Article by Tom D'Angelo, legendary cheerleaders. Star NFL player alums raise the torch for Miami Hurricanes on their playoff run. Scottsdale, Arizona. Carson Beck had a heavy burden on his shoulders when he walked onto the field at the Cotton Bowl with 6 minutes remaining and the Miami Hurricanes clinging to a 3-point lead over Ohio State in the college football playoff quarterfinal. And it had nothing to do with anything his coach, Mario Cristobal, or offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson said on the sideline. This was much bigger. It was a casual, quick conversation with a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest ever to play his position in college or in the NFL. Beck, the Hurricanes quarterback, was watching the defense once again smother the Buckeyes' offense when he turned and saw former UM receiver Michael Irvin cheering on his alma mater. Okay, that's not unusual. Irvin makes sure he is noticed by everyone on the sideline. But it was another former Cane, this one larger than life, that had Beck all googly-eyed. I look to my left, and it's Ray Lewis standing there, Beck said. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Beck's father, Chris, was a linebacker at Navy, and Beck actually thought about playing the position before deciding on quarterback. Smart move. Carson's favorite linebacker was Ray Lewis. So I look at him and just shake his hand, Beck continues. He introduced himself, and he's like, go win us the ball game. And I was like, well, now I have to. We literally have to go score. I can't let this dude down. And he did not. Beck led Miami on a 10-play, game-clinching touchdown drive, securing a spot in the national semifinal in the Fiesta Bowl against Ole Miss. But it wasn't just Lewis and Irvin he and his teammates made happy. It was a litany of other Hurricane legends, including Edgerrin James and Andre Johnson, Coach Jimmy Johnson, who are turning this playoff run into a star-studded reunion. All those guys were here winning championships. Offensive lineman Inez Cooper said, they pass on the torch to us. We're just trying to keep on and leave it the way they left it. But it's just good for those guys believing and trusting us. Hurricanes were most polarizing college team in America. Back in the day, Miami was the program. While winning 5 national titles from 1983 to 2001 and finishing number 2 4 times, the Hurricanes developed a cult following similar to the old Oakland Raiders that stretched from coast to coast, and the players had no boundaries. They were very comfortable being the villains, letting the other guys wear the white hats. They spoke their minds and in most cases were encouraged to do so by their coaches. They ran afoul of the law, which only enhanced their reputation. Miami was the most polarizing program in the country and was must-see television. It was players like Irvin and Lewis and so many others who defined that culture, and now those players are embracing this team that has the program in a spot that was once the norm until a more than 2-decade drought had Miami fans longing for the bad boys of the good old days. It's amazing seeing guys like that on the sideline. Linebacker Wesley Bissainthe said, Ray Lewis, come on. That's amazing. Just having guys who have been there and done that just to come back here and watch our games and just be there and give us words of encouragement, it's amazing. Mark Fletcher's conversation with Edgerrin James helped him get over fumble. Miami running back Mark Fletcher fumbled in the red zone late in the first quarter against Ohio State, costing Miami its first chance to score. Fletcher was met by James when he came to the sideline. He came up to me and was like, are you all right? Things happen. It's all good. Just calm down, and then let's get back into it. Fletcher said. Then I was able to calm down and get back into the game and just go play. Just having voices like that around the building, here at practice and at the games, it's very helpful for us. And when one of those voices is James, the third leading rusher in UM history who holds the single-game rushing record of 299 yards against UCLA in 1998, guess what? You listen. Beck's introduction to UM's past was the season opener against Notre Dame. The Georgia transfer was about to walk into the field for the coin toss when he noticed former UM receiver Andre Johnson, the Hall of Famer, who was the third overall pick in the 2000 NFL Draft. Introduced myself, Beck said. I'm shell-shocked, like, dude, this is Andre Johnson, literally standing next to me so casually, and I'm about to walk out and play this game. Receiver C.J. Daniels transferred to Miami after playing 4 years at Liberty and one at LSU. Like Miami, LSU has a rich football tradition and welcomes back its alumni. But for Daniels, nothing compares to the support he's seen this Miami team receiving from those who came before it. There was definitely a lot of people there at LSU, Daniels said. But here, the guys on the sideline are more hands-on. They're more engaged. I think they really got a place in my heart that really gets me going. Just seeing them just kind of gives me extra fuel and extra motivation. Michael Irvin makes sure he is seen, heard on sideline. Irvin, who won 3 Super Bowls with the Cowboys after being a part of Miami's 1987 national championship team, has become the face of Miami's famous football alumni. And if you can't see Irvin, which is highly unlikely, you can certainly hear him. Mike Irvin's my guy, Cooper said. He always greets me, even when watching us practice. He's just screaming names. I'm just happy for him to just keep doing what he's doing, keep coming to our games and doing all that. That builds us up. We got fired up every time we see him down there jumping up and down, celebrating and going crazy. Beck, too, has been inspired by Irvin. I love him, he said. The energy that he brings to this team, it's irreplaceable. Cooper had one last message for Irvin. If you're listening to this, keep on coming to the games. Keep doing what you're doing, he said. Oh, you know he's listening, and you know he will. All right, heading back to USA Life. Under 2026 movie preview, classic stories, old favorites, and new toys are coming. The movies of 2026 have got it all, from iconic Disney toys and Steven Spielberg aliens to Ghostface and Baby Yoda. Ooh, and don't forget Superman's party girl cousin. Even Emily Bronte has a part to play this film year. Marvel's biggest heroes are back in Avengers Doomsday at Christmas, and we get to see Homer's epic like never before in Christopher Nolan's summer movie, The Odyssey. But the year is packed top to bottom with major stars such as Ryan Gosling and Super Mario, and returning series such as Scream and Star Wars. Here are exclusive peeks at 15 movies arriving in 2026 that you absolutely positively must see. The Rip, coming out on January 16th. The only streaming flick on this list, the twisty Netflix action thriller features Matt Damon and Ben Affleck as Miami cops who show up for a simple cash seizure at a stash house. When they discover several $1 million of cartel money, a stressful night unfolds as their team has to figure out what to do with all those banknotes while dealing with internal and external threats. The Moment, coming out on January 30th. Charlie XCX plays a fictionalized version of herself in this mockumentary, which also stars Rosanna Arquette and Alexander Skarsgård. The movie follows the British pop star prepping for her first headlining tour, navigating the daily ups and downs of her personal and professional lives, and wondering if, quote, Brett Summer is truly forever. Wuthering Heights, coming out on February 13th. Promising young woman director Emerald Fennell tackles Bronte's beloved Gothic novel. The saucy psychological drama stars Margot Robbie as Kathy and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, two 19th century forbidden lovers whose grand romance navigates outside obstacles and dark complications. Scream 7, February 27th. The latest installment of the long-running horror series reunites original Scream writer and now director Kevin Williamson with franchise star Neve Campbell when slasher villain Ghostface shows up in her Indiana small town. Sidney Prescott, Campbell, scrambles to keep her daughter safe from the masked menace. The Bridal, coming out on March 6th. Maggie Gyllenhaal's genre-smashing monster movie is a wild new outlaw take on the Bride of Frankenstein. In the 1930s, the makeshift creature Frank, Christian Bale, requests a companion. A murdered young woman is reanimated as his eccentric, makeup-streaked bride, Jessie Buckley, and the two go on a killer crime spree. Hoppers, March 6th. Human animal lover Mabel, voiced by Piper Curda, uses a technology that allows her to hop her consciousness into a robotic beaver and talk with critters. She goes undercover and discovers all sorts of things about the animal world in the Pixar animated comedy, also starring Bobby Moynihan, John Hamm, and Meryl Streep. Project Hail Mary, March 20th. Based on Andy Weir's best-selling novel, the sci-fi adventure stars Ryan Gosling as a junior high science teacher recruited by NASA for a mission to save mankind. When his cosmic quest goes sideways and he's the only survivor, the unlikely astronaut befriends a strange alien life form as the two work to help each other's species. Ready or not, here I come. March 27th, the horror comedy sequel returns, Samara Weaving as Grace, a newlywed who lived through a bloody night being hunted by her new weirdo demon cult in-laws. But things don't get easier when her survival triggers a new game in which she and her estranged sister, Faith, played by Catherine Newton, are targeted by a high council of rival families. The Drama, April 3rd. It doesn't get much more starry than this romantic dramedy. British Museum director Charlie, Robert Pattinson, and American bookstore clerk Emma, Zendaya, are an enjoyably engaged couple heading into their wedding week until information is revealed that throws their relationship into a tailspin and threatens the impending nuptials. The Super Mario Galaxy movie, April 3rd. The first Super Mario was one of 2023's biggest hits. So, of course, Plumber's Mario, voiced by Chris Pratt, and Luigi, voiced by Charlie Day, are back for another animated adventure. This time, the video game guys run afoul of new enemy Bowser Jr., Benny Safdie, son of Bowser, Jack Black, and also meet Space Princess Rosalina, played by Brie Larson. Mother Mary, coming out in April. Anne Hathaway stars and sings in this psychosexual thriller as the title character, a pop music icon prepping for a comeback show. Needing a dress, she reaches out to Sam, Michaela Cole, her estranged BFF and former costume designer, and the reunion opens old wounds while sparking a new reinvention. The Mandalorian and Grogu, coming out on May 22nd. Armored warrior Din Djarin, Pedro Pascal, and his little buddy, also known as Baby Yoda, hyperspace jump from Disney Plus to the big screen. The Star Wars pair are enlisted to help the New Republic with pesky Imperial warlords, plus form an alliance with an ex-rebel pilot, Sigourney Weaver, and get involved with Jabba the Hutt's son, Jeremy Allen White. Disclosure Day, June 12th. Spielberg has a good history when it comes to aliens and UFOs. Anyone remember E.T.? So even though we don't know much at all about this mysterious sci-fi thriller, the film about us finding out where we're not alone in the universe will probably be a banger, given that it stars Emily Blunt, Colin Firth, Josh O'Connor, and Coleman Domingo. Toy Story 5, Coming out on June 19th, Woody, voiced by Tom Hanks, Buzz, Tim Allen, and the gang return for the latest installment of Pixar's storied franchise, and this time they have to deal with a digital world. Fan favorite toys face off with the new technology in the playroom, including an antagonistic frog-themed smart tablet named Lilypad, played by Greta Lee. And you are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. All right, heading back to USA Sports, National Basketball Association, NBA Power Rankings by Lorenzo Reyes. Celtics continue their top 10 climb, Thunder back to number 1. The new year is bringing some parity to the NBA. No team is flashing the dominance that we had seen over recent stretches, as the longest active winning streak going in the league entering the week beginning January 5th was just 3 games held by the Boston Celtics and Philadelphia 76ers. It's interesting because the Celtics suddenly are creeping up the standings and are making a case for the second spot in the Eastern Conference, and with star player Jason Tatum yet to play a game and possibly out all season. All of this raises the question, if Boston remains competitive deep into the season and if Tatum is eventually cleared to return, how should the Celtics handle that? Here are the USA Today's Sports NBA Power Rankings after Week 10 of the 2025-2026 regular season. Note, records and stats through January 4th, parentheses, show movement from last week's ranking. Top 10, number 1, Oklahoma City Thunder. They are 30-6. They gained 1 spot. Detroit Pistons are 26-9. They moved up 1. San Antonio Spurs 25-10. They moved down 2. Boston Celtics 22-12. They moved up 2 positions. Denver Nuggets in 5th place, 23-12 record. They moved down 1. In 6th place, power ranking, New York Knicks 23-12. They moved down 2. In number 7 position, Minnesota Timberwolves. They are 23-13. They moved down. Los Angeles Lakers is number 8. They are 22-11. They moved up 1. And in number 9 power ranking, Houston Rockets 21-11. They moved down 1. Phoenix Suns, they are 21-14. And I believe I was reading that wrong. They were unranked previously. After prying away the top spot from the Thunder last week, the Spurs have lost 3 of their past 5 as Victor Wembanyama suffered another injury. So, even though the Thunder have been vulnerable and even though they have struggled against teams with defensive length and athleticism at the wing, OKC regains number 1 status. The Celtics, though, have been quiet risers behind Jaylen Brown, who is having an MVP caliber season without Jason Tatum, Achilles injury. Boston Celtics suddenly have the NBA's second-ranked offensive rating. The Lakers are seemingly dealing with internal tension amid lingering questions about their subpar defense and offensive fit issues with Luka Doncic and LeBron James, but Los Angeles keeps on winning. Numbers 11 through 20. Number 11 is Toronto Raptors at 21-15. They moved up 1. Number 12 is Philadelphia 76ers, 19-14. They moved up 3. Miami Heat are 20-16. They were unranked. Orlando Magic 20-16, moved down 3. At number 15 is Cleveland Cavaliers 20-17, moved down 1. Golden State Warriors is at number 16. Number 17, Chicago Bulls. Number 18, Milwaukee Bucks. Number 19, Portland Trailblazers. Number 20, Atlanta Hawks. Joel Embiid is playing more minutes for the Sixers and is averaging 28.7 points per game over his last 7. The Heat, after losing 9 of 11 throughout December, have course-corrected and have returned to their offensive pace with Norman Powell making an all-star push. Miami has won 5 of its last 6, including 1 against the top seed in the East. The Magic have to figure out how to incorporate Paolo Banchero into the offense more efficiently, as his on-off numbers remain relatively underwhelming. Article by Mark Giannotto, Hawks seeking to trade Trae Young, who wants out. So we're going to stay with the NBA theme. Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks appear headed for a breakup. The two sides are discussing Young's potential exit from the team ahead of next month's NBA trade deadline. According to multiple reports on Monday, January 5th, with the Hawks and their four-time All-Star willing to part ways with one another less than 5 years after the point guard led the Hawks to the Eastern Conference Finals and became the face of the franchise. Young's representatives and the Hawks began having collaborative talks over the past week, ESPN reported, after speculation about the point guard's future increased throughout the first few months of this season. Young's contract includes a nearly $46 million cap hit this season and a $48.9 million player option for 2026-27, but Atlanta elected not to offer him a max extension this past offseason. Trade destinations. Only one team has been publicly linked to Young at this point. The Washington Wizards are considered a legitimate potential trade destination for Young, according to the longtime NBA reporter Mark Stein, and the deal would involve the expiring contract of Wizards guard C.J. McCollum. No trade had been finalized as of 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday, January 6th. Whether Young wants a new contract along with the trade, as well as the Hawks' willingness to attach a draft pick in the deal, could complicate any potential moves and limit his suitors. There's also the reality that Young's value is diminished since his defensive liabilities have muted his impact more noticeably in recent seasons. Teams with immediate need for a point guard, such as the Minnesota Timberwolves or perhaps the Houston Rockets, could make sense, but matching Young's salary would involve a significant salary going back to Atlanta in return. Perhaps there's a dark horse that needs more offensive punch and can cover for Young defensively, like the Toronto Raptors. Young could also be part of a deal with the Sacramento Kings, who are reportedly open to trading much of their roster. Stats. Young is 27 years old, has appeared in just 10 games this season due to injuries, but the Hawks have a 2-8 record when he plays and a 15-13 record when he does not. He is averaging 19.3 points and 8.9 assists per game while shooting 30.5% from three-point range. Forward Jalen Johnson has emerged as Atlanta's new star, with the team's defense improving significantly without Young on the court. Young missed 22 games earlier this season with a sprained MCL and missed his 5th straight game due to a quad contusion when the Hawks suffered a 118-110 loss to the Toronto Raptors on Monday. Atlanta went 0-5 during the 5 games Young played after returning. Young has a career average of 25.2 points, 9.8 assists, and 3.5 rebounds over 8 NBA seasons. Article by Sam Hutchins. Memory of Corey Adams is lifting Ole Miss. As Ole Miss football prepares for the college football playoff semifinals against Miami in the Fiesta Bowl, the Rebels are refocused on what matters. How could they not be, considering the location of their most recent game? Ole Miss players have mentioned last summer's death of freshman defensive lineman Corey Adams frequently in the past few days. Adams, 18, was shot and killed outside a house party near Memphis, Tennessee on July 19th. No one has been arrested in the shooting death. Adams was from New Orleans. His high school, Edna Carr, is 6 miles from the Caesars Superdome, where the Rebels beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl CFP quarterfinals 39-34 on January 1st. The Rebels have worn helmet stickers with his initials and number throughout the 2025 season. I feel like he's watching us, and he's guiding us through each game, star Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss said. Number 6 Ole Miss, 13-1, will face number 10 Miami, 12-2, in the Fiesta Bowl on Friday, January 8th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN in Glendale, Arizona, with the winner advancing to the championship game January 19th. Lane Kiffin's dramatic exit on November 30th and the fallout from his move to LSU have soaked up most of the media attention around Ole Miss. Rebel players have been intentional about correcting that during media opportunities. Ole Miss linebacker T.J. Daugherty said he will continue to play with Adams in mind when he takes the field in the Fiesta Bowl. It adds a sense of purpose. I'm standing for who Corey was as a person, Daugherty said. He was a great person. He came to work every day, even with the small amount of time I got with him from when he first stepped on campus. I watched him come to work every day, and I watched him get better. Chambliss has led Ole Miss to the semifinals in its first college football playoff run. It's a season that has had immense meaning to him personally. He has turned from a Division II transferred to a burgeoning star. Regardless of how his pending waiver turns out, Chambliss has played himself into a 2026 NFL draft prospect. The meaning to the season, though, goes beyond himself. Adams, he was always smiling, Chambliss said, enjoying life, enjoying being around football, enjoying being around guys as well. For us to have the season that we are having, it means a lot. I feel like that's really him. Corey Adams' impact on Rebels at Sugar Bowl. It was easy for Ole Miss to rally around Adams in New Orleans. His mother came to speak, and Edna Carr High School was represented in ways ranging from shirts and signs on Bourbon Street to the front desk at the St. Charles Street Hilton, proudly advertising he played football at Carr. He was 24, just a little ahead of Adams. Defensive lineman Will Eccles spoke after the game about someone who never got a chance to play for Ole Miss. He's been on my mind heavy, Eccles said. He's on my mind, really, all day. When we breaking it down after practice, we break it down on C4. Adams' high school teammates knew him as a caring, generous person with a zeal for life. Those attributes had already started to pervade the Ole Miss locker room. What's helped to focus Ole Miss after Lane Kiffin distractions? New Ole Miss football coach Pete Golding said his team is one that seeks deep purpose. Not that the program pushes anything to anyone, he explained, but there aren't usually many open seats at the team's chapel services. The Rebels are already on their first CFP run in school history. Getting to the Fiesta Bowl has required wading through a sea of distractions since Kiffin's move November 30th. Athletic Director Keith Carter said he has sensed Ole Miss has moved on from the mountain of coach-related questions. We're solely focused on this playoff run, Carter said after the Sugar Bowl, going 1-0 as the guys talk about all the time. You've been listening to a reading of the USA Today, January 7th. We read the USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call us at 821-5555. Your reader for this hour has been myself, Dan Arth.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service with episode number 5 of Mark Twain by Ron Chernow. Following that, at 3 o'clock is Healthy Living, and at 4 o'clock, a re-airing of today's Buffalo News. Stay with us for these readings and more. Are you facing challenges with vision loss and need help with your smartphone, sending emails, navigating the internet, and staying connected with your family? VIA, Visually Impaired Advancement, is offering free classes for seniors weekly at multiple locations with free assistance for your smartphone, email, and internet skills. There's a new session every week, and it rotates between the South Towns and the North Towns. It's at your local Erie County libraries and at 10 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. For more information, call Elhana Porter at 716-888-4632. Again, that's 716-888-4632. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,